Our next sample is going to be a seam finish that is called the flat felled seam. There's a couple ways of doing this. Again, there's always more than one way to do something. This is going to be the simplest approach, and also it will be one that you will be using on our shirt when we get to constructing our shirt. So the first thing you're going to do is to cut yourself 2 pieces of muslin or some fabric that you're using for samples, 8 inches long by 5 inches wide. You want to put them together. Again, we're actually on this sample, we're sewing wrong sides together. So if you wanted to put a little marking here for the right side of the muslin, but just to be aware of the fact that what you're looking at right now is the right side and this is the wrong side. We're going to create the seam to the outside of the garment. And then you can come over and just back tack, give yourself a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you've done that, you can take your sample, and like all good pressing methods, you want to press it open first. And then you're going to press it to the side. Now with this seam finish, you can do the seam finish to either side, and you see when we get to our shirt that you're going to need to choose. You're going to need to be aware of this. So let's all do this over to the right. So once you've got it pressed open flat, you've really opened up the fibers in there where the thread is. So it does give you a really nice clean finish. And now what you're going to do is, after you press it open, is you're going to press all the seam allowance to the right. The next step is to take this top seam allowance and just push it over. And now what I'm going to do is, with the under seam allowance, I'm going to trim that back a little tiny bit more than half. So you can use your eye for this. You want to go kind of slowly in the beginning. This seam finish is the seam finish you see on your jeans. So any of your jeans will have, any of your denim jackets, your jeans will almost always have flat felled seam. And the nice thing about the seam is that it's finished all over in every direction. So once I've got that trimmed, I can get rid of my scrap here. And then what I'm going to do is to take my seam allowance here and fold it under in half. So I'm taking the seam allowance here, taking the larger seam allowance, and I'm folding it over so it comes right to that crease there. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see. Okay, so I was here, I opened up, I trimmed back, and now I'm going to push this over, fold it in half, and over again. And now what I'm going to do is to stitch right along this seam. You can pin it if you want, make sure it's nice and straight. Another great way to do this is to press it. Once you've gotten it pinned, make sure that it's nice and straight. So I'm pinning this way, all the way up. Again, I'm in a little bit of an awkward position here. You turn. It should fold over pretty easily. This is not a difficult seam application. It can go off a little bit, so you do need to make sure that it's nice and straight. And again, what I can do here, once I've got it folded, is to go in and press it. particularly on muslin. This doesn't work as well on denim, but on muslin you can go in and press it. And now what I'll do is go into my machine and run a stitch down. And the last step is to take that edge you turned under and you're going to stitch it down. So you'll have a little lip here. You want to make sure when you stitch that you stitch as closely as you can to the edge, and of course as straight as you can. And please use a contrasting thread on this, because then you can get to see exactly how straight that you're making your stitches. So your seam allowance always, it comes, not always, but in most cases will come to the right side of the fabric. And then that's where you're top stitching. So it is a nice detail. And again, you can stop to look at your jeans to see how this is done. Now on the back, it's also nice and clean, except you're just going to see the one top stitch on the back. Okay, so now I'm going to run my serger around the edges, or if you're at home, if you're working with a sewing machine at home, something that is a nice seam finish for the edge of your sample. Okay, I finished my edges with a nice serging stitch, so my sample's ready to go. Again, make sure that you take your time with this, but it's a beautiful seam finish to have, and we'll be doing this next week on our shirts. Okay, good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.